It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy. Back to Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew a version 1.0 decklist to the Commander 5 us in my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video. Like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out those links in the description below. The Discord's been popping lately, and I'd love for you to join. But today, we're going to cover kind of an odd commander. It's not necessarily from Tarkir or Over, but it is in Mardu colors, and it is a commander that one of my friends plays, and I thought I'd finally take a stab at it. It's Duke Ulder Ravengard, a 6-mana Boros 5/5 human noble soldier that at beginning on combat on your turn gives another creature you control haste and Myriad until end of turn. Of course, two very interesting abilities. Haste, of course, being able to attack this turn. Myriad says whenever that creature declares an attack, you're going to make a token copy of it, attacking each other ones of your opponents. Myriad's a very interesting ability, and depending on what you give it to, Myriad can be really useful. Our deck is striving to give Myriad to a bunch of things that have ETB abilities and damage-enhancing abilities, just to deal damage to our opponents. There's cards that naturally have Myriad. If you give them Myriad again, they will Myriad twice, which is kind of fun, depending on what you want to do with that. There are creatures that there are legendary creatures that, of course, when you give them Myriad, you can't have more than one copy of them, but if they have a nice ETB ability, you could get that more than once. There's a lot of options at how you want to take Duke. My hope is that I've tried my best to find a nice, fun, middle-of-the-road way to just take advantage of it and show off Myriad. If you're interested, tomorrow's video, we're going to be covering the new Mardu Nuri from the main set, and that's going to be kind of Myriad focused as well, if you're interested. But I want to say thank you so much to the channel members. If you're interested in supporting the channel for just a little bit and seeing all the videos early, check it out in the link down below. But all right, Myriad. I wanted to cover a couple creatures that have Myriad, and I think we'd be perfectly happy to give them a second copy of Myriad. Alteral Survivors is an 0/4 with Trample and Myriad that gets +X+0. Where X is the number of defending lands player controls. Note that it says as long as it's attacking. It doesn't say if it declared an attack. So any Myriad copy of the Survivors will get the buff, and hey, that could be really nice depending on who you're attacking. Note that you probably want to pick the player with the least lands to attack with Alteral Survivors, so that way the other two get bigger, right? Goldlust Triad just came out in the Tarkir decks, and this is one of those ones that to me just feels like a no-brainer. Flying in Myriad, so already it being flying, you have a chance to get multiple of its treasure tokens, but if you were to give it Myriad a second time, now you get 2 copies of it attacking 2 different players, just going to probably net you some treasures and give you some mana overall. Ironwell Forger is a new card at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you control your commander, you get to give a non-legendary creature you control Myriad until end of turn. So again, potentially could give this and Duke at the same time. You could give a creature 2 copies of, two instances of Myriad, and they could even have a third, depending on what you want to do. But the point is, here's just another way to hand out Myriad every turn. Things like Blade of Selves is just going to give an equipped creature Myriad. It is a nice ability, depending on what you want to get it onto. Legion Loyalty is a big white enchantment that just gives all your creatures Myriad. Again, just allowing all of your creatures to do that. And then, of course, with Myriad, the tokens go away at the end of combat, so you don't get to keep them around. And then Windcrag Siege, of course, it getting very popular, right, is a new Boros way to get that classic Ishin ability. Whenever a creature attacks and causes a triggered ability of a permanent we control a trigger, it goes off additional time. Note that Myriad is a triggered ability, so you will double up Myriad just with Windcrag Siege, which is pretty darn cool. But all right, what are we going to target with Myriad? I mean, there's a lot of ways we can do this. I wanted to just try to pick good bodies that have good effects that are going to be useful for us. Aerial Extortionist is a 4/3 that says whenever it enters or deals combat damage to a player, you exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it. So think about this. Aerial Extortionist is going to get its trigger to exile something when you make the Myriad copy, and if nobody has a block, when it hits that person. Meaning you could, if no one has any flyers and you give Extortionist Myriad, you're making 2 on ETB and you're making 3 on damage. So that's 5 things you're just straight up exiling. Yes, your opponent can recast them, but they have to recast them. And I think that's important, especially when you start talking about high value creatures or mana pieces or big combo pieces, right? Is sometimes just having to redeploy them can be enough. And then whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, we get to draw a card. So again, just drawing the card's nice too. Agris cost might look really odd. Here's a 4-mana 3/4 legendary but it says whenever it becomes the target of an ability that targets only it, we can pay 1 in a hybrid. When we do, copy that ability for each other creature you control that ability could target, and each copy targets a different one of those creatures. This is a huge, think about this, for Duke or Ironwell Forger, you target Argus cost, pay 2 mana, all your creatures now basically can get Myriad for that turn. And they're all going to get haste, and they're, so obviously for the legendary creatures, it's kind of a miss because you got to get rid of the tokens. But like still, you're talking about 2 mana for Myriad for your entire board, and then all your creatures are attacking and going to become a big threat to your opponent. Angel of Invention is a big 5 mana 2/1 with lifelink. Might seem odd, but it buffs all of our creatures by +1/+1. So during the Myriad, right, that's +3/+3. And then whenever it comes in, you can either give it 2 +1/+1 counters or make 2 servo tokens. So again, it could be useful just to keep the servos back as blockers, or make the Angel Invention a 4/3 with lifelink, right? That on the Myriad copies are going to die, but hey, 8 life could be very worth it just over the course of that. And that's not including that buff. That buff is huge. Think about it. A Myriad, just 1 Myriad on this is +3/+3 to all your other creatures. With 3 Angel Inventions, each of them would get 2/2. But my point still is +3/+3 to your entire board is a really nice buff. Bloodthirster is a really fun one. So it's a 6 mana, 6/6 flying trample or flample. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you untap it. After this combat, there's an additional combat. And it can't attack a player it's already attacked this turn. So Bloodthirster effectively should be able to give you 2 extra combats, right? Because it's going to hit somebody and do that. Now, the problem with Myriad, right, is you exile the copy at the end of combat. And so, unfortunately, Bloodthirster isn't infinite combats because the copies you make of Bloodthirster go away, and that original one is only going to be able to attack 3 times. But this will still give you infinite combats because the Bloodthirster copies are still ideally going to be hitting your opponents. So Bloodthirster can give you infinite combats, as many as you want. Well, not necessarily infinite. I guess it can make you 9 combats. But again, effectively most of the time, any amount more than 1 or 2 is going to be enough. My point is that Bloodthirster can't indefinitely attack, but it can give you enough combats to help you probably just take over a game. Captain of the Watch, when it comes in, makes you a few soldiers and buffs all your soldiers and gives them vigilance. Again, just a nice ability since Duke is a soldier, if I recall correctly. And you make these tokens. Cap feels great, comes in, makes 6 more soldiers on its if you give it Myriad, and then all your soldiers are getting +3/+3, right, because of the captains. Inspiring Overseer is one of a few creatures that can draw us a card when it enters. So again, hey, it comes in, draws you a card, and gains you a life. And even if those tokens die or by their blocks, or you don't really care because you drew a couple cards from it. Lorna of the Third Path is a legendary creature, so again, it could be odd as a Myriad target. But remember that whenever it enters, it just destroys up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So even the copies that come in and die, it's still going to nuke off some artifacts and enchantments, which is huge. Moonshako Cavalry might be a little bit Magical Christmas Land, but here's an 8 mana 6/6, and whenever it comes in, gives all of our creatures flying and +X/+X till end of turn, where X is the number of creatures we control. If you manage to Myriad this thing, I mean, the game is just over, right? So let's say it attacks with Myriad, right? You make 2 copies of it, basically giving all your creatures, if X is the amount of creatures you have before Myriad goes off, right? 2X + 2, right? +X/+X, and flying. I mean, unless your opponent has flyers, Cavalry's just going to end the game, right? And now you have 2 more copies of Cavalry that get its own buff as well. I mean, it's one of those cards that, like, the turn it comes in, it's going to be huge, and if you can Myriad this thing, it's going to be brutal. Remember that you could even Myriad at the turn it comes in if you have Duke out. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those nice top-end creatures. Boiler Bill I just thought was interesting. Here's a 5 mana 6/6 that you can get down a little bit cheaper if you want to, but whenever it enters or attacks, you deal 4 damage to any target. I wish it was 4 damage to each opponent, but of course that isn't the case. But think about it. On a Myriad trigger, you have 2 targets of 8 when they come in off the Myriad. The original one attacking will give you 4, so you got 12 damage to any target, 3 triggers of 4, right, off just the attacks. And then it's a 5/5 that your opponents still have to deal with. I think this is the values there, especially so you can pend it down earlier if you don't have the mana. But again, 4 damage to any target can hopefully hit out creatures, it can hit out players, it can hit out planeswalkers. I think there's a lot of options there. Port Racer, Just like Bloodthirster is another creature that's going to give you all those bunch extra combats. The only difference between Portraiser and Bloodthirster is Bloodthirster's in the air, making it a lot easier to hit somebody, whereas Portraiser can attack a player it hasn't already attacked this turn, just like Bloodthirster, right? So the big difference is just it's not in the air, which I think makes a difference, but Portraiser's still good. And remember, you're making myriad copies of it. If we could protect the original Portraiser, again, at minimum, you're talking about, 2 extra combats at minimum, if not more than that, depending on your Portraiser's hitting. To go a little bit into that, because I just realized I said that and didn't say more about it. It says, whenever it deals damage to a player, you untap each creature you control. After there's combat, this is an additional combat. So, if all 3 of them, so let's just say there's a world where Portraiser and the 2 myriad copies hit. All 3 of them are going to give you an extra combat immediately, and then Portraiser is going to come back and go, oh, well, I get to attack again, right, because he's untapped, and he attacks another player he hasn't already attacked. The Myriad's going to go off again, right, because it gets Myriad until end of turn, not just that combat. So that's at least 9 if all of them hit, or maximum of 9 if they all hit. Again, I know that's Magical Christmas Land, but it's good to know the top end of some of that stuff. Priest of Ancient Lore, again, gaining a life, drawing us a card. Red Dragon might look odd, but I think it's really fun. Whenever it comes in, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. So again, there's 8 damage to each opponent on just 1 Myriad. If you get those worlds where you give a double Myriad, right, that's just a lot of damage to your opponents. Roving Harper coming in and drawing a card. Sanctuary Warden might look odd, but it's really fun. It comes in with 2 shield counters, so it's going to kind of protect itself. But whenever it enters or attacks, you get to remove a counter from a creature or planeswalker you control. And if you do, draw a card and make a citizen. So the myriad copies come in, remove shield counters from itself, draw you 2 cards, make you 2 citizens. Then the myriad copies go away. But I mean, to me, it's just all value. Skyclave Apparition just seems like a ton of fun. Whenever it comes in, you can exile up to 1 target non-land, non-token permanent you don't control with mana value 4 or less. Now, when it leaves the battlefield, that card's owner makes an XX, where X is that card's mana value. So you're going to lose, right, the 2 that come in off of the Myriad, but I don't think you really care, because a 2/2 illusion is a whole lot different than a high value 2 mana, artifact, right? So to me, there's just no downside in getting this apparition to go off in Myriad. Solemn, right? When it enters, you go get a basic land. You won't get the dying because you exile it on Myriad, but I don't think you really care. I think the ramp is well good enough. Spirit Companion just draws you a card, right? And then Trumpeting Carnosaur seems fun. Discovering 5 on your Myriads seems kind of cool. 5's a nice number to our deck. It's going to get us a lot of different things. But again, we talked about creatures entering, so I think it makes sense to pay off creatures entering the battlefield, especially since all the creatures we've tried to pick have some sort of ATB ability. Panharmonicon, right? Just doubling them if it's an artifact or creature. Elish Norn, just doubling all triggered abilities that would go off if a opponent we control enters and shutting down our opponents. And then Devilish Valet, having its power double whenever another creature enters. Fun thing about Devilish Valet with Myriad is you could have Devilish Valet's Myriad go off first, have those creatures come in, and then have other creatures' Myriads go off if you have more than 1 in a turn. And now Devilish Valet is getting those buffs. Its Myriad copies getting the buffs. So that's kind of fun. Otherwise, Devilish Valet just becomes a huge threat, potentially being upwards of 16 or 32 power in a combat, on just an average combat with Myriad, right? And just becoming a real threat to our opponents. Of course, Impact Tremors, War Leader's Call. We want to pay off those Myriad copies coming in and doing damage. But I think Cathar's Crusade makes a whole lot more sense in here. Same thing with Gold Knight Commander that we're paying the list that does something very similar. Whenever a creature comes in, Crusade puts a counter on each creature you control. Gold Knight Commander just gives them a +1/+1 buff till end of turn. But again, the counters are even strictly better, especially for the creatures that are sticking around. But hey, now every creature that's coming in off Myriad's getting a buff, and it's becoming more and more of a threat to your opponent. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at Duke, and going into testing, I think we'd want to look a lot into ETB abilities. I really went back and forth on Meteor Golem, just coming in and destroying a non-land permanent. Makes a ton of sense to me. My only reason against it was 7 mana, and I liked the idea of something like Skyclave Apparition more. But Fire Commando seems fun. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, you draw a card, and that could be fun. And then it's another Angel in the Air that could hurt our opponents. Also a soldier, right? So for Captain of the Watch, that makes sense. But I also thought about Conjurer's Closet. being able to like blink our creatures on end step, getting their ETBs again just seems really good, especially since all of our creatures, our key creatures, have ETBs. I just wasn't sure how often, I think it's a good card and it probably makes sense to come in. I honestly just couldn't find the slot for it, and so I was having a tough time with that. But let's get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on our channel is not to find Magical Christmas Land. It's not to show off our best plays, but it's to get into some game scenarios, start running through our decks and understanding how we set up our board state. Here we're keeping a 3-lander with Decanter, giving us the maximum hand size is huge, especially with those ETB creatures that draw us cards. There's Skyclave, Goldlust Triad, and Great Train Heist, which we can use for 2 different things. For 4 mana, we can just get an extra combat, and then for 2 extra mana if we do that, or for 3 mana, we can give all of our creatures first strike. Or for 2 red mana, you can just have whatever creature hits your opponent, make us a treasure. I mean, most of the time you want the top ability for the extra combat. If you got the 6 mana, the first strike on top of it ain't bad either. But I think I'm going to just get Temple of Triumph in here turn 1. I mean, there's nothing better to do. We see a command tower, which we'll happily take, right? Duke is 6 mana, so we do need to make our way up there. Turn 3, we see Carlock, something we didn't cover in the presentation, just giving us extra combats the first time we attack each turn. Again, this is something that I think I covered in the deck, but I think I could have covered a lot better as extra combats. But I think I'm thinking Decanter. If we top a land there, that's perfect. Otherwise, I'm thinking just the Triad here. Get it set up for next turn. If we hit the land and go into Duke, we'll potentially have a chance to make a couple of treasures. Otherwise, we just have Carlock next turn. All right, so we didn't hit the land, so I think the answer is probably still Carlock this turn. So have Goldlust Triad attack. We're going to immediately get an extra combat, and it gets first strike. So let's say that, in the first, let's say no one has any flyers. We're getting 6 treasures. If one person has a flyer, maybe we only get 4 treasures. But the point is we're still netting mana here, and we got a bunch of creatures in attacking. That's 12 damage on the first combat, 12 damage on the second combat. We're getting in the air. With the 4 mana, I mean, if somebody has something key, just do the apparition now, get rid of it. Otherwise, I kind of like the idea of getting something like Nyalian. But the truth is, we want to leave one of these treasures up in case we don't draw something for Duke. So I'd say let's just put something like War Leader's Call in. Going to deal some damage when thing comes in and buff our creatures. Now, okay, unfortunately, we didn't hit the land, but that's okay. We still have the 6 mana for Duke. And now, even if somebody removes Duke, we're still in a great spot. Because you go to combat, give double Myriad to Goldlust Triad. You still get 2 combats. So we have, 2 copies of it attacking our other 2 opponents. There's 5 Goldlust Triads on each combat. So that's 40 damage if no one else has any flyers. And then you still have Carlock. It's actually 50, because they all get the +1 from War Leader's Call. Carlock is still a 6/5 that's going to be able to hit twice with first strikes. I mean, you have a potential huge damage for damage this turn. And if we survive till next turn, I mean, you just put something down like Devilish Valet, which is going to be a huge threat. And that just goes to show you that I think, with the right sets of cards, we can look pretty darn good. Playtest number 2 here, we're keeping a 4-lander with Commander Sphere. Again, just trying to get our way up to Duke. There's the Agris Cost. I always want to say Argus Cost. It's Agris Cost. And then Great Train. So not a bad start. And there's the Triad again. We'll get the Parlay in to Surveil 1. Ooh, we like Elishnorn. Elishnorn's going to be really helpful when we make our way up there. We'll get the Alpine Meadow down, turn 2 in tapped. Turn 3, we'll just go for the Commander Sphere. All right, turn 4, we don't see another land, but we do see Fear of Missing Out. This is a creature that I think is going to be interesting in this deck. When it comes in, you pitch a card and draw a card, so that can be fun, right? But whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, which we're pitching cards, we could potentially get there, we just get an extra combat. I think this is kind of interesting and can be an ability that could help us out. Here, I think we have to go Triad just to set ourselves up for those treasures, because if we don't draw land next turn, we really need those treasures to start getting more things out. But we do hit the land, so I think we just go Duke. Again, pick Triad. Like I say, at minimum, we're probably getting 4 treasures. At maximum is 6, right? So we'll just go with the minimum just for the sake of that. We could just get Agris down for next turn. But truthfully, I think we're just in okay shape. Like we could get something like Fear Missing Out down if we want to do that, but like we don't have that stuff in our graveyard just quite yet. So I don't know that Missing Out needs to be done right now. So I think we might just leave the 4 mana up. Maybe people think we have protection or something for our board. Now with 6 mana or 10 mana, sorry, with that, I'd play Alishnorn. Although we don't have anything that has a truly huge ETB right now, I think it'd still be good. I could sack 2 treasures to play this Roving Keeper and draw 2, which could be good, right? There's our 6 land. And we could pick the Roving Keeper as our Myriad target, which would draw us 4 cards, right? Because each of them would draw twice. But I think I still like the Triad again. Use this thing in the air that we have. Use it to our advantage. And I think we still want it, right? Still just that. We could sack the other 2 for this Companion if we want to draw a little bit more. Draw 2 more cards, right? I don't think we mind, especially since we have it there, and then just attack. And again, if no one deals with the board state, I mean, I was hoping we'd draw into some protection, but like truthfully, if no one deals with the board state, the game's over, right? Because Triad's already done 24 damage a combat twice, and it's just going to do it again. And then we can, make it even better with something like Grain Train Heist. We have Argus that we could play and target it with the Myriad to give everything. You know what I mean? There's so many points from here where if our opponents haven't dealt with us, I think we're just in grand shape. Let's get into playtest number 3, keeping a big 5-lander with Arterial Survivors and Flare of Fortitude. The Fortitude is really good, allowing you to protect your board, give everything indestructible, and as long as you have a white creature that isn't a token, you can actually sack it instead to play it for free. So here we're just working our way up. There's the War Leader's Call. Can be really great, not only just for the damage, but for the buff, right? Giving everybody, all our creatures +1/+1 is a huge upside. I think this is the turn where we got to make our decision. Do we Extortionist, which would be another great Myriad target, or do we Cathar's Crusade? I really like the Extortionist here, only because it's going to exile one thing when it comes in, and then next turn it's going to exile right those more things. So we come back to our turn. Ooh, we see Aurelia, so we're just 1 mana away from getting that extra combat every turn with Aurelia. Now, the nice thing about the Flare here is that we do now have the Extortionist that we could sacrifice if need be to protect our board. I mean, there's always the world where we sack, Duke as well. But again, the nice part is, as much as we like the Extortionist, it's worth sacrificing it to just protect our other creatures. I think we still, like I said, if we have a bunch of things we really want to remove on turn 6, I feel like that's probably the case. Do the Extortionist. Otherwise, these Survivors is just going to be a nice threat to our opponents. And then, well, that was probably the best we could have asked for, being able to play something like Aurelia. And whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures, and there's additional combats. And now we could still do both. But again, Ariel just keeps picking off our opponent's creatures and permanents. And I think we're just in straight up good shape there. Let's go one more playtest. Again, we have to kind of skip around some of, when you're playtesting, right, you got to stick around some of the, what does my opponent have? Do they have it? Do they don't? Because truthfully, right, we don't know. But I think what we're trying to do is just hedge our bets on what's the best thing we can do so that you understand what you're working towards. Here we're keeping a 3-lander with Spirited Companion for that draw, Captive the Watch, Swords. And then I don't recall if we talked about Redoubled Stormsinger. This is a card we're going to talk a lot about this week in a different of our Mardu decks. But it says, whenever it attacks, for each creature token that you had that entered the battlefield this turn, create a tap and attacking copy that's a token that's copy of it. Remember that when you attack, you get to stack your triggers, meaning we could put the Stormsinger on the bottom of the stack and copy all of the Myriad creatures that came in, which is a really nice ability. So turn 1, there is there's our Commander Sphere for a little more ramp. I think I kind of like getting the Companion down here. Just getting some draw, right? Working our way into some more things. I think I'm good on the Commander Sphere here. Again, we want to kind of get ourselves up towards that 6-mana threshold. Well, we know we're going to get there next turn. So we got 5 mana this turn. Man, I really love the Captain of the Watch. But we'll do the Stormsinger, and then we can leave up Swords to Plowshares just for some interaction. And then now my thought is this turn, we pick Duke down, pick the Companion, which is going to draw us 2, and then Stormsinger is going to draw us 2 more. So we're going to potentially lose a couple cards this turn, but I think it's okay. Again, the attacks. I guess, well, we could have picked the Stormsinger. and not had to draw 4 cards. But I think the 4 cards was still important for purposes of next turn. So what do we pitch? I think we pitch... let's say we use that on the previous turn. We'd only have to pitch 1. I mean, the Big Sword could be more card draw, but I think we've got that pretty much settled out. Removal, damage, more creatures, more damage on our tokens. I think it's got to be just the card draw. I mean, I think we clearly have it. Plus, we have it with the Commander Sphere. My turn. Ooh, Jeska's Will. This is a great time to draw that. That would be 4. Let's say someone has 7, so that's 11 mana. We could get Red Dragon and Cathar's Crusade down here. Or we could go for the Captain, but I kind of like the Red Dragon and the Cathar's Crusade for that. And then attack, I'd give the Myriad to the Red Dragon. We make 2 of them on Myriad, 2 of them with Stormsinger, so that's 16 damage to each opponent. Now they're all +4/+4 because of the Cathar's Crusade. And I think we're just in the money. Yeah, it's a lot of Magical Christmas Land on people not removing things at the right time. But I think truthfully we have to remember that in order for you to truly playtest your deck, you have to see the good angles so you understand where your deck's trying to hit. So that way you can better prepare for those other scenarios. But let me know, what do you think of Duke? I think it's a really fun deck. I'm going to be sending the link for this video to my buddy who plays it. I'm excited to get his opinion on the deck. But thank you so much for watching, and I catch you all next.